Middle of the country, but not middle of the road opinions. It's the podcast dedicated to sports in the air capital of the world.
I'm going to Wichita.
Wichita, Kansas, and beyond. With Tommy Castor, Weston Mills, and Blake Cripps. This is Keeper of the Games.
Some may call us mildly entertaining. Some may say we're wildly unqualified. I say we're exactly where we're supposed to be, talking about the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. This is episode number 33 of the Keeper of the Games podcast. Shockers, Jayhawk, Wildcat fans, I'm warning you, you may want to sit this one out. You did not have a good week. We're going to get to it all this week. Blake Cripps, Tommy Castor has surrendered the keys. He'll be playing the role of the dad today, allowing his 16-year-old son to test drive his 70 Camaro while he's learning to drive. Will you get the show back in one piece in about an hour, Tommy?
You know, I don't know. I'm just excited about the fact that it's kind of like a night off. I can kind of sit back. I can put my feet up on the desk. I can enjoy because you're hosting tonight.
And you can also blame Weston Mills for this happening. Weston will be playing the role of the YouTuber with his camera out, watching the crash happen and doing nothing to stop it.
That's a perfect intro because I was thinking what my response was going to be, and I was thinking, I'm just going to sit around and watch this train wreck. It'll be fantastic.
Yeah, you know, we'll see how it works. Tommy thinks that this is a good idea. I didn't ask for this responsibility. He texted me again this week, and we'll see what his opinion of this is in about 60 to 90 minutes. Couple of superlatives, episode 33. This is episode 3 of season 2, episode 2 of season 2. You can get all the details at KOGsports.com. We're on Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and TuneIn. And if you dare, I'm told you can watch on Facebook or YouTube. Not that I would recommend that, but apparently we're available there. On the show today, Chiefs to the Super Bowl, college basketball, and the Wichita Whiparound. By the way, you can also follow us at KOGpod on Twitter. We'll begin today, of course, with our top story. And I'm just warning you, it's going to be our top story next week, and it's going to be our top story the week after that. The Kansas City Chiefs are back in the Super Bowl, second straight AFC Championship win, beating the Bills 38-24. Travis Kelce, monster day, 13 receptions, 118 yards, 2 touchdowns, an NFL playoff record for catches in the playoffs by a tight end. Tyreek Hill, a 71-yard catch and run, 9 receptions, 172 yards. Their average victory margin in their previous 8 victories for the Chiefs, 4 points. This was a return to dominance for the Chiefs offense. It was fantastic to see. I think the defense played well enough. I'd really bottled up Allen. The Bills' running game was not incredibly impressive. And the Chiefs offensively, at one point late in the first half, 3 consecutive drives, 21 points that were unanswered after trailing 9-0. The 9-0 start, I listened to the whole game. I didn't watch a second of this game. I listened to it all on the radio, and the 9-0 start for Buffalo was the only part of the game that I didn't actually listen to. I was keeping track of it on my phone. Obviously, the special teams were a disaster for the Chiefs, but that was about the only thing that didn't work well for Kansas City. Tommy, this was a return to form for Patrick Mahomes. He looked completely healed up, like there was no injury. The offense was clicking, and not only that, Clyde Edwards-Helaire was a major part of the offense. He returned for Kansas City. The offensive line did a fantastic job blocking up front. We've got something to talk about there on the injury front, too, for the offensive line. But all in all, offensively for the Chiefs, this was the performance we had been looking for the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, Blake, I saw a prominent sports writer on social media call this the Petty Patrick Revenge Tour. And, you know, I would agree with that. You know, all week long, all we heard from the national media was how great the Bills were and how solid Josh Allen is and how dynamic this Bills offense is. And you know what? The Bills offense has been really good for most of the season. And I'll admit, last week on this program, and I've said it for a couple different weeks, that I thought the Buffalo Bills were the toughest matchup for the Kansas City Chiefs in the playoffs. Well, ultimately, at the end of the day, the Kansas City offense came together. And, I tweeted this, I believe this wholeheartedly, that this Chiefs team just is built to come from behind. They always have, they always will. The biggest knock on Kansas City all season long has been, why aren't they beating teams by more points? Why aren't they putting their boots on the throats of the opponents and just blowing them out of the water? We all know they can, so why aren't they doing it? And I think it takes a little bit of adversity for this Chiefs team. I'm not saying they get bored at all, but it takes a little bit of adversity. It takes their backs up against the wall a little bit for maybe them to wake up. I don't exactly know what to call it, but that's exactly what happened. Mecole Hardman muffed that punt. It set up a goal-to-go situation for the Bills. They got in the end zone, and just like that, Kansas City down 9-0 really, really early. And then, I don't know if you all saw the video that's been going around social media of the team rallying around Mecole Hardman and telling him,
it's on
hey,
Twitter. It's a great video. Travis Kelce, Patrick Mahomes, huge leadership.
There's a lot of game left. We got a lot of time left to go out and win this game. And that's exactly what they did. And they didn't look back. They put their foot on the pedal and they took it all the way to the Super Bowl. And they're getting that Lamar Hunt trophy. They have it now back in Kansas City for another year. So I can't say enough good things about Kansas City. I know that we can get into the nitty gritty here in just a moment, but that's my overall thought process, is just how solid this team looked and how they made Buffalo look like just an absolutely pedestrian offense all game long.
I'm a little disappointed that neither of you started this whole thing with the old classic Andy Reid. How about those Chiefs?
How about those Chiefs?
Did you see how he did that as usual after the AFC Championship little ceremony or whatever you want to call it afterwards? But Tommy, I think something that I think is so interesting. We're going to talk about that happened last week, and then we'll talk a little bit about what's coming up this week. You mentioned the Petty Pat tour. And really, I don't think it's just him. I think it's this whole team. And I think the narrative that was pushed all week leading up to this and really prior to, even before they played the Browns was, this Chiefs team, they're just not the same team. They only beat so-and-so by 6. They only beat so-and-so by 4. They only beat so-and-so by 7. Hold on, wake up. They went 14-2, should have been 15-1. They lost the last game only because they had
didn't even try.
And this team showed up to play to let have you ever seen a statement game in the AFC Championship? That's how absurd this team and this roster is, and I just don't understand why anybody continues to fuel the fire with these guys, because I think there's often conversation, right, about how much do athletes actually care about that rhetoric that goes on, this and that, and I think overall it isn't a ton, but I think it's little moments like that when you have a team that is so talented, and I frankly do think I think this team was a little bit bored throughout the year. I mean, the talent.
Do you buy into that? That was a big topic of conversations. Oh, this team's going to get it figured out in the playoffs, and they're just not trying. They know they don't have to run their full playbook. Do you buy into that?
I mean, I think it's a combination of a lot of things, right? Like, I do think there was some, hey, they're not putting their, they were not quite figuring out the end of the game scenario where they were taking the gas off the pedal a little bit. I think it was a combination of not wanting to show the playbook a little bit, and then a combination of they were kicking teams' ass in the first half, of some of these games where they just went on cruise control. And I think it's hard in a sport that is so physical and that it is driven on pure athletic ability, to maintain that level of intensity when you've just come out and whacked somebody the first half. And that can be 14, 17 points in the NFL. I mean, that, while that's certainly not, you can certainly overcome that. That's still a pretty dang good lead. That's a pretty good control for the NFL. So I think the fact that these guys just had this fire fueled all week building up to this, absolutely drove this game in part. And then, of course, I mean, the other half of it, right, is because I did mention, look, I think there's only some of that matters so much. The other thing is, let's get real, right? Like, they're playing for a Super Bowl. That's what they care. They don't care about shutting up the pundits. They care about winning a Super Bowl, and this was the next step in getting back. But I do think, those kind of things play a small part in this. And as we get to talking about the upcoming matchup with the old Tampa Bay Buccaneers, did you guys catch today what the number 4 wide receiver for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers happened to say about his speed versus Tyreek Hill's?
No, I didn't. Would you enlighten us?
So Scotty Miller went on, I believe it was the Dan Patrick Show, and he said that he thought he believes he's faster than Tyreek Hill. Now, I don't want to play into what drives me nuts sometimes with the media and the clickbait stuff. So Pro Football Talk, of course, puts out the article. Scotty Miller, says he's faster than Tyreek Hill. If you watch the interview, he is over the top complimentary about Tyreek Hill and basically says, like, look, to play in the NFL, you have to believe you are the best at really everything that you do, right? And Scotty Miller is incredible fast. I want to say he's from Toledo. He's from a MAC school. I'm almost positive on that. Was a
Bowling
guy
Green.
There you go, Bowling Green. But he, I'm telling you, he's not faster than Tyreek Hill.
No, he had 33 catches, 501 yards. I mean, he had a fine season in 2020. But yeah, that's a little bit ridiculous.
I got to say that the other person that has proclaimed that they are faster than Tyreek Hill is Adam Schefter, and I would take Adam Schefter, I think, in a race with Tyreek Hill over Scotty Miller. That's for sure.
Would you take Scotty Miller? Would you take Adam Schefter over Rich Eisen in a 40-yard dash race?
Yes, absolutely.
You would.
Yes, I would.
Rich Eisen is definitely getting up there. Speaking of running, I thought that it was really fantastic that the running game for Kansas City played such a vital role in the offense. Clyde Edwards-Helaire had been out since week 15, got in the end zone, first ever playoff touchdown. Darrell Williams also had a nice day running the ball. His attempts were down, but he was the running back that the Chiefs seemed like they went to in the third, fourth quarter when they were trying to go into a different gear in the offense. The Bills obviously did a much better job defending the run because, I mean, what did Edwards-Helaire have? Like 150 yards against them in the first matchup. He absolutely tore holes through the Bills. So they certainly changed things up, but Mahomes found the lanes. Mecole Hardman had that 50-yard run. By the way, a bad foot concussion protocol, 3 touchdowns, no picks for Patrick Mahomes. Like the run game helps with that. And Tommy, I think that the biggest thing that I took away offensively was that not necessarily that the Chiefs have had trouble with like stepping on people's throats, like we've said, like my old co-host Paul Savage used to say, step on their throat, big boy. It's more the Chiefs did a better job in this game of changing gears in the offense, of understanding the time and the score and being able to run that 4-minute drill, not just scoring fast or just playing when you have the entire playbook open. They did a great job, and credit Andy Reid and this other guy that can't coach, Eric Bieniemy. He's never going to get a head coaching job, apparently. Credit those two guys for being able to get the offense shifted down into a lower gear. You don't always have to have things cranked up at 5th or 6th gear. Sometimes you want to be methodical. Sometimes you want to take your time and make sure that you're getting 5, 6. You don't need the huge chunk play at that time of the game like the Chiefs had in the second half up by 2 scores against the Bills. You want to be able to run the clock a little bit. You want to establish the running game. And so I think that it was a better job, not necessarily of trying to, put teams away. You don't always have to put teams away. The Chiefs did a better job shifting down the offense against the Bills in the AFC Championship game.
Yeah, without a doubt. Look, we know that this Kansas City team, can do the big play. They've done it, forever. Just the long, pass down the field. Tyreek Hill just on a go route and, ends up connecting with them and they can score quickly. We know that about Kansas City. But this was an example of how this Chiefs team can put together sustained drives down the course of the field with that running game. And I got to give a huge shout out to Darrell Williams. Of course, we know Clyde Edwards-Helaire was back. He was a big contributor, got into the end zone. But Darrell Williams in the playoffs has been spectacular. This is a third string running back that, that was undrafted coming to Kansas City that has been waiting in the wings for a long time. If you think back to last year, it was another D. Williams that was the darling of the playoffs for Kansas City. That was Damian Williams. But now with Clyde Edwards-Helaire hurt for the past couple of games, of course, Le'Veon Bell dealing with it with an injury in this last game, they've they've relied on Darrell Williams to run the football. In the game against the Browns, he ran 13 times for 78 yards. He had 4 catches and 16 yards, and he was a pivotal factor in that game. Then, of course, in the Bills game, it was more spot duty because Edwards-Helaire was back, but he carried the ball 13 times for 52 yards and a score. So the Chiefs have been leaning on him, relying on him, not only in the running game, but also in the passing game in the backfield. So hats off to Darrell Williams, and I would expect that we continue to see him contribute in the Super Bowl. The other thing I want to say, Blake, and this goes back to what you were talking about the play calling from Andy Reid and Eric Bieniemy, and I can't take credit for this sentiment. This was Sam Mellinger from the Kansas City Star who said this the other day when he said, and this is going back to the McCole Hardman situation, where he said that he wholeheartedly believes that Andy Reid calls specific plays for specific people in specific situations. And, of course, McCole Hardman was hanging his head. He was really upset with himself after the muffed punt. I know Chiefs Kingdom, they weren't happy with him either. And then what does he do? He goes out and he scores a touchdown. Then he has another long pass play for 50 yards. So Andy Reid and Eric Bieniemy, specifically in my opinion, and in Sam Mellinger's opinion, drew that up for McCole Hardman to get him back into the game. And that's the genius of Andy Reid, and that's why people want to continue to play for teams like Kansas City.
Another thing too, and it's kind of a perfect segue because you talk about Darrell Williams, you talk about McCole Hardman, and those guys had fantastic games, and that's those pieces are so vital to what they do, right? But if you go back to the core three, right, like if you look at Patrick Mahomes, which obviously I think Blake kind of let in with these stats, 29 for 38, 3 touchdowns, 325 yards. Tyreek Hill, 9 catches for 172 yards and dropped that 40-yard dime from Pat early in the game.
Preposterous.
Then Travis Kelce, 13 catches for 118 yards. I think we're to a point, and I'm going to give a shout out to one of our loyal listeners, Wichita firefighter by the name of Austin Leedy. Also Mound Builder.
Thanks, Austin.
Mound Builder alum. He had made a comment to me at one point, and this is probably we don't need to get into this topic because this is a perfect offseason topic, but he thinks that really for the Chiefs, they should inherit every dime they can in Patrick Mahomes, Tyreek Hill, and Travis Kelce to keep those 3 together moving forward. And I think a game like this is a perfect example. You see that insane production from those 3, and then on the flip side, what that unlocks for, you mentioned an undrafted free agent in Darrell Williams to rush the ball, very effectively. Yes, McCole Hardman was an early draft pick, but a guy who's really kind of fell into a number 3, number 4 type role at times on this team to flourish, because there is just has to be so much focus on those 3 who produce at a high level, even with that focus, that it just creates all this opportunity for other guys. So, I think you saw in this game what folks had said, well, that's what we had seen out of the Chiefs, but boy, we're just not seeing this down the stretch. Things, whether it was a matter of things finally clicked, or they finally opened things up, or they finally, their interest is back into it. The Chiefs are here, and that's the team, that's the offense that's going to Tampa Bay come next week.
Obviously, we're going to get into a ton of Super Bowl 55 preview next week on the show. We're going to lead the show with it, obviously, as the Chiefs go to back-to-back Super Bowls, trying to be the first team to win back-to-back Super Bowls since, I believe, the Bill Belichick, Tom Brady Patriots in the early aughts of this millennium. So some major history on the line. So before we wrap up the Chiefs for this week, I wanted to get you guys any initial thoughts on Super Bowl 55 and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. For me, obviously, 2 really key injuries. Eric Fisher out with an Achilles injury. It's torn, reported by NBC Sports. He is out for NFL 55. And some people have said, this stage of his career, might we have seen the last of Eric Fisher? That'll be another good offseason topic. But for sure, the Chiefs will not have him. I think he was ranked he was in the top 10 late in the year when they played on Sunday Night Football, the Pro Football Focus ratings. He was like the 7th best tackle in all of the NFL, the highest rated offensive lineman at his position for Kansas City. Big loss. And then, of course, we haven't even really gotten to the defense yet with sacks from L'Jarius Sneed, Frank Clark, and Tenno Passanio. But L'Jarius Sneed without with a concussion in that game, was evaluated for concussion protocol, did not return. I have not been able to find any update on him. Obviously, you would think with 2 weeks he would be able to come back, but everybody's head is different. Just because Patrick got back in 7 days doesn't necessarily mean that he'll get back in 2 weeks. It doesn't equate like that. Every head injury, every hit is different. So those are the 2 big question marks that I have for Kansas City coming in, because I do think that with Tom Brady's limited mobility, 3 sacks logged by the guys up front for Kansas City, I think putting pressure on Tom Brady will be big. But you've got to have your front guys up there and able to rush the quarterback. So Sneed's injury, and then obviously the offensive line without Eric Fisher, a huge question mark and a huge hit for Kansas City going into Super Bowl 55.
Yeah, Blake, we know now after that Bills game where the offense stands for Kansas City. I've got no doubt in my mind how the Chiefs offense will perform. So I'm with you. I think the biggest question marks going into the Super Bowl will be, what's going to be happening with the defense, what's going to be happening with the offensive line. It's not only Eric Fisher, it's also Mitchell Schwartz. And will Mitchell Schwartz be back? He hasn't played a game for Kansas City since, I believe, week 7 was the last time he actually suited up and played for the Chiefs, dealing with a variety of injuries. And so that's going to be the biggest question. How will Patrick Mahomes be protected, in this game against the Buccaneers, who have, a pretty dominant defense. They played pretty well all season long on the defensive side of the ball. It's not just Tom Brady, there in Tampa Bay. They've built themselves a pretty solid defense. So what's going to be happening as far as the protection is concerned? If Eric Fisher is going to be out, assuming that Achilles is torn, what's going to be happening with Mitchell Schwartz? And then also defensively for Kansas City, you mentioned L'Jarius Sneed going out with a concussion. I've been very impressed with him over the course of the playoffs. I'm sure Weston has a lot more to talk about in regards to L'Jarius Sneed and what his availability may look like. But also not just L'Jarius Sneed, but how about Juan Thornhill? And he was a guy that, from Pro Football Focus, was the top rated Chiefs defender in the game against the Buffalo Bills. And, he seemed to be making plays left and right. I know he didn't have a sack or anything like that. But, we talked about it last week on the program about, okay, what happens if guys like Rashard Fenton and Bashaud Breeland are limited by injuries? Who's going to step up? Weston, you were the one that said, I'm interested to see what Juan Thornhill can do in this game. He showed up big time. So my question is going to be both offensive line and then also defensively going into the Super Bowl, what that's going to look like for Kansas City. The other thing I'll mention, and Weston, I know that I give you a hard time quite a bit. I know that I don't always give credit where credit is due.
I know. Where's the accurate take horn? Just because you're not hosting, you can still use the accurate take horn.
So here's what I'll tell you. So I went back because I had an inkling that this is what happened. I thought I remembered this correctly. I went back to a very old episode. It was all the way back in the month of April. And you predicted the Chiefs and the Buccaneers in the Super Bowl.
Wow.
Way before the season even started. We were discussing Tom Brady going to Tampa. We were discussing Rob Gronkowski coming out of retirement, going down to Tampa Bay. You predicted the Chiefs and the Bucs in the Super Bowl. I got to give you credit where credit is due. Way to go.
Hey, I appreciate that. I mean, if you look at this, and I'm going to pivot back and talk about the defense before kind of moving forward and talking about the Bucs. But if you look at this Buccaneers roster, I mean, there is just a ton of talent on this team. I mean, they were talented last year. Their defense was very good. They had great skills positions. They had a quarterback that could air the ball out, but made a lot of mistakes. So then you all of a sudden plug, one of the greatest quarterback of all time into that, even at the end of his career. And then they, added to that defense and added to those skills positions. Boy, this roster is loaded and they're definitely clicking at the right time, obviously. So they're going to be a tall task, but going back to talk about a little bit about the defense from last week, because you're right, boy, the defense played just incredible. I mean, I don't know if I would venture to say I'm sure a lot of Chiefs fans are, keep up. They know what's going on around the NFL. But maybe some don't. I don't think they appreciate how good the Bills offense has been really all season, but particularly the last half of the season. I mean, for instance, if you just look at points scored this year, they scored 501 points all season, whereas the Chiefs only scored 473. And I know that's not a big difference, but I know we all place this in our heads, this high praise of the Chiefs offense, and rightfully so. Well, the Bills offense had been every bit as good, if not better, throughout the season, or maybe just more consistent. So to see the defense do what they did, and we finally, Tommy, we got one of those games that we've talked about out of the two big defensive linemen. Frank Clark had 2 quarterback hits. He had 2 sacks, 3 total tackles, and then just the disruption of Josh Allen. I mean, there was plenty of times where you saw him, you saw Chris Jones, you saw Tano back there making Josh Allen uncomfortable. And he's a tough quarterback to sack. I kind of compared him during the game. I mean, he reminds me of Ben Roethlisberger, but with speed. I mean, if you've watched Ben Roethlisberger's game, he's incredibly hard to sack, and he moves well in the pocket. But for him, it's solely just to find a receiver down the field. He's not really going to run and pick. I mean, he can, but not really going to run and pick up a first down. Whereas Josh Allen can do both. He really moves.
Hey, there were multiple times, Weston, that I felt like, Josh Allen is a good runner, but for whatever reason, the front four for Kansas City and even the linebackers, they were coming at him. And in a lot of cases, like I remember saying this at one play with Chris Jones, where I don't even know who was blocking him, and he just tossed him out of the way and was just on the ground. And Josh Allen is back there unblocked. You're not going to get away from a guy like Chris Jones in that regard, and then of course the couple of the sack, that one sack in particular where, Allen should have went down immediately, but he lost another 10 or 15 yards just by being drugged back, backwards. So yeah, I totally agree with you. There were just some plays where, Allen is hard to sack, but if you're coming unblocked, it's going to make it a lot easier.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So I think we finally had kind of that moment, right? And whether, like you just mentioned, right, whether it's just doing the right things, putting yourself in the right position to be there, regardless of, the way the line blocked or this or that, those are the steps you're going to need again next week against Tom Brady, who doesn't move as well, but is much more effective than Josh Allen about getting the ball out of his hand as quickly as possible. Josh Allen doesn't get through the progressions the way Tom Brady does. And Josh Allen was effective because he could move around and still work through those progressions as he was moving out of the pocket. Tom's not going to do that. He's not going to move out of the pocket. He's not going to run around. But I mean, he's going through progressions 1, 2, 3 throw now. I mean, that's the difference you have with Tom Brady. He's just a lot harder to sack in that manner. But going back to the secondary, because that's another thing. I of course want to talk about L'Jarius Sneed and Juan Thornhill, but I want to start by giving credit to both Charvarius Ward and Bashaud Breeland, who I think we kind of skip over sometimes just because we're enamored by how well Brett Veach did, I think, with drafting L'Jarius Sneed, and then, obviously Juan Thornhill being our young rookie from last year. But Charvarius Ward and Bashaud Breeland just continue to be so consistent throughout the year. Charvarius Ward, you just don't hear his name called at all. And that is one of the biggest credits you can give, right, to a defensive back, is they're just not wanting to pick on him. And I think teams continue to attack L'Jarius Sneed because he is the rookie. But he just continues to hold his own and just play some incredible football. And he himself, I think the old Honey Badger's teaching him up. He had that sack as well, so that was exciting to see. But going back to Juan Thornhill, I think he is clicking at obviously the most perfect time for the Chiefs, right? But he was working his way back from that ACL that he suffered last year. And I think things are finally coming to him because you can see that the talent's there. The talent's been there all year. And I don't think it's a matter of he had been beat out by anybody. I think they were just slowly bringing him back and, probably have had some limited abilities with recovering from that ACL. So, but this is a unit that held, Stephon Diggs to 6 catches and 77 yards. And I know that doesn't sound, just mind-blowing, but he's been incredibly solid all year. You got, Cole Beasley had 7 catches for 88 yards, but if you look at it, that's on 9 targets. Stephon Diggs had 11 targets. They had to target Dawson Knox 8 times, the tight end who they don't use a whole lot, just because there wasn't anybody open. So just incredible play, out of the Chiefs secondary. Couldn't be more impressed with how they finally clicked, I think. So I know I'm kind of going long-winded here, but let's transition now. And you, Tommy, you mentioned the offensive line and what we're looking for this week. So I think this is interesting because, and I'm glad Blake gave so much, pointed out all the praise that has been for Eric Fisher as of late, because he is a guy who has just been given such a hard time by the Chiefs fan base. And he didn't play well early in his career, and he was the number 1 overall pick, right? I think we've all been there. Like, I don't think you can really be a Chiefs fan and honestly say, oh, I have never, harped on Eric Fisher's play. That's just not realistic. I mean, he was the number 1 overall pick.
It's a rite of passage, just like complaining about Elvis Gerbach.
That's right. It's just going to come with that territory. But, the last 5 years, really, maybe 4 years, he has played very, very outstanding, solid, consistent football, and it is going to be a big loss against a Bucs defense who, has Jason Pierre-Paul. They're going to be playing with Vita Vea this week, who, if I remember right, he broke his ankle against the Chiefs. Wasn't it like the first or second play? Maybe I just was watching a Bucs game and happened to catch the first, but I don't know why I'd be watching the Bucs if it wasn't against when they played against the Chiefs. But I think that's when he broke his ankle, and he's back now, played every snap, dang near every snap last week. So he'll play, and he's incredibly good. And then, of course, we all know Ndamukong Suh, who can be just incredibly dominant. So Vita Vea and Ndamukong Suh coming up the middle. So that's kind of, I guess I think that's going to be more your concern, because it looks like we're going to see Mike Rimmers at left tackle. We're going to see Nick Algoretti at left guard. We'll see Austin Ryder at center. Obviously, those two being consistent. They've played there all year. Steven Wisniewski, who was part of the run last year, has been back on the team for a bit, will probably slide in to right guard, and Andrew Wiley will kick out to right tackle. And I think that's how they actually finished the game last week against the Bills. So I think I'm more concerned about Steven Wisniewski and Austin Ryder having to consistently block him down to Suh and Vita Vea than necessarily Mike Rimmers and Andrew Wiley seeing Jason Pierre-Paul off the edge. So that's kind of where we're looking at. I think that is a big concern. At least I think the positive here, right, is you have seen so consistently the Chiefs be able to just plug and play at offensive line, which is not a typical thing to do, but they have just consistently been able to do that as guys have been injured and shuffled, and they just seem to consistently get great play. So no reason to suspect anything otherwise.
Super Bowl 55.
I do want to mention very quickly, sorry, let's not forget about Shaq Barrett on this defense for the Buccaneers as well.
Yeah.
I believe he intercepted Aaron Rodgers. I know he intercepted Aaron Rodgers on Sunday. So, let's not forget about him either at outside linebacker for the Buccaneers. They've got a lot of talent on the defensive side of the ball. And so I think that's going to be a major challenge for Kansas City. So I know we'll talk more about it next week, but let's not forget about him.
Super Bowl 55 on February 7th, 5:30 on CBS, on February 7th at Raymond James Stadium, and it'll be the first time that the Super Bowl has been hosted by a team playing in the Super Bowl, so some history here. And by the way, Tom Brady matching the career NFC Championship total for Aaron Rodgers and Drew Brees on Sunday, and we're going to have plenty of breakdown next week on that. So Chiefs fans, great week for you. Everybody else, this is going to be a difficult last 30 or so minutes of the show, because for college basketball fans down in our neck of the woods, this was not a good week at all.
Blake,
We begin.
Blake, hold on. Before we transition to college basketball, I got a fun fact about you. You said the stat about first time a team has hosted the Super Bowl. So I got to give a shout out to my boss, because he was texting me about this. Apparently, sometime in the 1980s, and I don't have the actual date, but the Rams made the Super Bowl, which was being hosted in LA, but at the Rose Bowl. So kind of a fun little caveat, right? So the Los Angeles Rams played in a Los Angeles Super Bowl, but not at their home stadium. So, obviously keeps that stat true, but something that just a fun piece of trivia out there for anybody who, I don't know, wants a little talking point at the bar next week.
Hopefully the Buccaneers will not be the first home team to win a Super Bowl coming up here in a couple of weeks. The Kansas State Wildcats are in a free fall, 69-47 losers to West Virginia, the number 14 Mountaineers. Last time out, 14 turnovers for Kansas State in their first 21 possessions. They had 17 points in the first half on 18 field goals attempted. That's a terrible night in the NBA for one player. That's what Kansas State did as a team. 18 turnovers in the first half. They had 28 turnovers in the game. Now, one thing that I have been reading is obviously Bruce Weber's seat has been warm the last few years. I don't know what the temperature is on it right now, but one thing that I did read and that I do believe, Kansas State is still playing hard. It would have been very easy to just totally give up on that game. Kansas State actually got back with an 8, and the defense that they played in that game was not terrible against what they held West Virginia to under 70 points. So it wasn't a horrible day defensively. West Virginia scores 75 points per game, so they were held under their average by Kansas State. By the way, Kansas State is the worst defense in the Big 12. So I feel like the guys are still motivated to play for Bruce Weber, but at this point, they're just so far down the ranks in almost every single major statistical category. They will be taking on Baylor as we record this. They are about tipping off in 15 minutes against the number 2 Baylor Bears at the Farrell Center down in Waco. Tommy, that was about the worst offensive half of basketball in college that I may have ever seen from a Power 5 school. It was atrocious.
28 turnovers. 28 turnovers.
That's so many.
28 turnovers in this basketball game for the Kansas State Wildcats. 28. I just need to keep saying that number over and over and over again. How about this? I know that you kind of threw these stats out before, but I gotta say this. How about only attempting 18 shots and getting 17 points out of those 18 shots and turning the ball over 18 times in that stretch? They turned the ball over more in the first half than they did scoring points in the first half. So I don't care what's going on. I don't care about motivation. I don't care about whether or not this team is still gritty enough to go out and play for their coach, Bruce Weber. I don't care about any of that, because at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is, are you winning? And then even if you're not winning, are you competitive? Are you making it a game? Are you giving fans a reason to tune in? At this point, the answer is a resounding no for all of those questions for the Kansas State Wildcats. There is not a chance in hell that Bruce Weber keeps his job at the end of the season. There's not a chance.
I will say, over their last 4 games, they have lost every one by at least 15. Every single one.
How, if you are Gene Taylor, the athletic director at Kansas State University, can you give your basketball coach a vote of confidence after this dumpster fire of a season at Kansas State? Now, again, I'm not going to come out here and say that Kansas State has this long, storied history of success. They've had flashes of success over the years, but
some under Coach Weber.
That's true, but this is a what have you done for me lately type league. That's just the way that it is. And at the end of the day, Wildcat fans deserve significantly better than what they have gotten, not just this season, but let's think about to last season when Kansas State finished at the bottom of the Big 12 as well. This is not just a new thing for the Wildcats. This is a continued decline of the program under Bruce Weber. I understand they made an Elite 8 run, didn't they, a few years ago?
Yes, they did.
Under Bruce
Won
Weber.
a Big 12 championship.
They won a Big 12. I understand all of that. But you know what? There have been a lot of coaches that have done that exact same thing that are no longer coaching the team that they had their success with. Look at a guy, I'm thinking of, just I don't know. There are all of these programs out there. The Texas program. Who was the coach for Texas for a long time, for a number of years? Rick Barnes. Rick Barnes was the coach.
Rick Barnes.
Yeah. Rick Barnes was the coach at Texas for a long time, had a significant amount of success over the years with the Longhorns.
Texas.
But it was the "what have you done for me lately?" and he hadn't delivered, and they ran him out of town. And now
never won the Big 12, not the tournament, not regular season. Incredible when you think of the players that he had there with LaMarcus Aldridge and Kevin Durant, that they never won the Big 12. It seems impossible.
I'm going to play
at the end of the day. Well, go. I'm just going to finish up by saying, at the end of the day, Bruce Weber has got to he's got to understand, and I think he probably does. He's not a dumb guy. I think he's got to understand, look, I know I'm trying to basically rebuild this program. I've got a bunch of young kids in here. I understand we're losing a lot of games, but there's a difference between losing a bunch of games while you're rebuilding and getting absolutely annihilated and blown out of the water game in and game out, losing to a D2 school at the beginning of the season. They're getting ready to play Baylor, who is an outstanding basketball team. They're going to get just absolutely railroaded by the Bears. I just don't see a scenario unless there's some miraculous turnaround and, they can, I don't know, they can win a bunch of games at the last part of the Big 12 regular season. I just don't see how Bruce Weber can keep his job.
So I'm going to play devil's advocate with the caveat that, Tommy, I agree with you. I cannot see a path in which he's back with Kansas State next year. But the expectations, and really my devil's advocate is really just in your comparison to Rick Barnes at Texas, because the expectations when you coach any athletic program at the University of Texas is going to be significantly different than the expectations when you coach at Kansas State University. Not to say that fan base shouldn't call for that kind of excellence, but this is kind of what I've said in the past is, well, who do you think you're going to get that's better? And the reason I agree with you now is, how much worse can it get, right? At this point, if I'm Kansas State, and I think the fan base has to understand.
Go back to Terry Asbury. That was pretty bad.
Well, and there's always exceptions, right? But, and you could certainly, I think the fan base just needs to have an expectation. And I think there's a lot of very educated and understanding fans that have an understanding of where the program's at, what they can do. But when you go out and get a name that isn't a big name, and I say that with the caveat of, of course, Kansas State's, they're not taking a Bill Self, they're not taking anybody away from a program, right? But going and getting a young guy, or maybe even maybe not a young coach, but someone that has done it at a smaller program and trying to have that replicate at Kansas State, I think is the path that they should do, instead of going and recycling a coach like they did with Bruce Weber, right?
But here's the thing: you gotta remember. I mean, I remember the Jim Wooldridge years, where the dude.
Years.
The dude was, I remember that last stretch of his tenure, he was wearing a neck brace on the sideline. I mean, it was bad. His teams were losing left and right. The program was in a downtrodden place at that time. They were able to go out and get Bob Huggins. I know Bob Huggins was only there for a year. I know he was coming off of, drama at Cincinnati. That's why he left there. But they went out and got Bob Huggins for a year. That turned into Frank Martin, and they were able to start to rebuild that program. So they can do the same thing right now. Just because the program's in a bad spot doesn't mean that Kansas State basketball is in a position where they're not going to have people that are going to be interested in that job, who are high caliber candidates to be interested in that job. So I know that question is, who are you going to get that's better? I think you could get a lot of people better than Bruce Weber who would be interested in coming and coaching basketball in Manhattan.
Well, and I do think there's a difference, at least in my mind. From what I'm telling you, I agree. I think they can get a high caliber coach. There's a difference between that and a big name. Like the flip side in Blake, calm down. I'm going to mention Les Miles and Kansas football.
Oh, great. Yeah, let's just circle it back around to KU football now. Everything's going to be fine. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead with this. Yeah, this is a hot take. Go ahead and spew this failed argument.
But that's what I mean, right? By Les Miles you can't deny he was a big name, right?
He was.
That's the difference. I mean, and absolutely, and I think of an example of high caliber was when Shaka Smart was coming out of ECU. Like that, look, that's a high caliber, and I guess he probably had a high name at the time. But that's probably more the path I'm thinking for Kansas State than expecting. They're not hiring Rick Pitino. He's not leaving. I know he's over at the. Is he nowhere?
Europe
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's right.
Oh, yeah, he is back at Iona. I forgot about that.
That's right. Rick Pitino's not coming to Kansas State. Like, you're not pulling a guy like that, a scenario like that. But that doesn't mean you can't get a very high caliber, up and coming, or even established at, that's just not in a Power 5 school to come to Kansas State and be incredibly successful. And I think to the point that you're making about, keeping the momentum, to me, that would be, at least in my mind, why I have switched on Bruce Weber keeping his job. Because look, Kansas State has had recent success. They had success with Bruce Weber, but prior to that, you can remember the Frank Martin years. You don't want to let Kansas State basketball get to a point like Kansas football, because once it is down there, it is so hard to bring it out, because you don't win without having high caliber recruits come in, and you don't get high caliber recruits coming in without winning. So it creates a real vacuum, a real circle of how to ever get yourself out of that. So that would be a good reason, I think, for Kansas State to move on from Bruce Weber, would be to strike. While you do still have some name recognition, there's going to be plenty of recruits coming out that remember any of the years between Michael Beasley and Dean Martin. Or Dean Martin.
Dean Martin. Wow. Correction and retraction.
Dean Wade. How about that?
Hey, there you go. A little better. But
I would love to watch Dean Martin play basketball for Kansas State.
He'd be the smoothest coach. I bet he could recruit to Kansas State.
Okay, well, there we go. So, I think with that, perfect time to let me say, all right, there's my take on Kansas State.
There you go.
And I don't know if there's much more else to add.
One other correction and retraction. I think I said Terry Asbury. It's Tom. Tom Asbury was the coach at Kansas State. Just to put a button on that, they're the worst shooting team. They're the worst field goal percent defense. They're the worst at the three-point differential. They're one of the worst free throw shooting teams, worst offense, worst defense in the league, and they're second worst in rebounding offense, third worst in rebound margin. That's how bad Kansas State is.
I do want to say, though, credit to Kansas State where credit is due. They are not the worst team in the Big 12. That goes to the Cyclones of Iowa State. How far has Iowa State fallen?
Yeah,
I can't see Steve Prohm keeping his job at the end of this season.
Here's the thing. Before the year, there was a narrative that you can't fire a coach this season because of coronavirus. It sounds like no, not for Tommy. He has no heart. No. He doesn't care about these families. Get him out.
It doesn't. The coronavirus, unless it's affecting players on the team and you're playing shorthanded.
It has at Kansas State. It has at
Kansas State, but in every other aspect, it doesn't really impact the game on the floor. I know it does a little bit here and there, but here's an example of that. It's got to go both ways. So Iowa State played Oklahoma State earlier this week, and Oklahoma State was without Cade Cunningham due to COVID-19 protocols. Oklahoma State still won that game by 21. So it goes both ways. I mean, Iowa State was kind of handed a little bit of a gift and an opportunity. Hey, they get to play against the Cowboys without Cade Cunningham. Didn't really matter. They still lost the game by 21. So, but I do have to say, I just mentioned, like I said, at least Kansas State is not the worst team in the Big 12 at this point.
They are not. That is true. Kansas State, as we mentioned, as we're recording this on Wednesday, they are getting set to tip off in 5 minutes at the number 2 Baylor Bears.
Did you guys see the spread on that game?
No, I'm sure it's like 25.
Well, okay, 25. What's your guess, Tommy?
28.
23.5. So pretty good.
That's a lot of points. That's a lot of points. The Wichita State basketball, a loss at Memphis last time out, 72-52, by far the Shockers' worst offensive night of the season. 20 of 68 from the field, 2 of 23 from the 3-point line. 56% from the foul line. They did not guard the three-point line well at all. They allowed 11 three-pointers against the Tigers. That's the second most the Shockers have given up this year. And the two main guys that we thought about coming into the year offensively, Dexter Dennis and Tyson Etienne, they combined to go 4 for 35 from the field. And it combined, Dexter Dennis was 2 of 15. He is 2 of 15 from the three-point line over his last 3 games, 3 for 23 from the field over his last 3 games. Etienne was 1 for 12 against the Tigers, didn't hit a 3. It was his third time under 10 points. And to make matters worse, they're supposed to be playing Cincinnati right now. That game has been postponed due to coronavirus protocols. This team has been dealt such a tough blow with the stop and start season that they have had. And with this loss against Memphis, they've got to make up ground to get back into that NCAA tournament picture. They were in the picture in bracketology from Joe Lunardi a couple of weeks ago, being in the next 4 out, but there's so little time. They now have so many games that they have got to try to get back on the calendar. They still haven't even put that ECU game back on the calendar yet for Wichita State. So next up for them, Central Florida on Saturday, 3 p.m. at Charles Koch Arena. But another stoppage in this season for Wichita State, and they really can't afford to be missing games. They need to play games to play their way back into March.
Look, I'm less concerned about the loss against Memphis on the road.
I am as well. I think Memphis is a pretty underrated team.
They're a really good team. They're second in the American Conference right now. This is not like the Shockers, lost to Tulane, or East Carolina or something like that. I mean,
I agree.
Memphis is a top tier American team. I know that it wasn't a particularly close game. I know the Shockers, lost by 20. I know it wasn't ideal, especially considering the run that the Shockers have been on as of late. That being said, I'm less concerned about what happened earlier this week against Memphis. And I kind of like what you said. I'm more concerned about this stop and start that the Shockers have had to deal with the last few weeks. It's hard to get in a momentum. It's hard to get into a routine when, one game is on, the next game is off, one game is on, the next game is off. Now, you would think ideally that it would give the Shockers more of an opportunity to practice and whatnot. And I'm sure it does because, these stoppages are not involving the Shockers. It's not COVID issues within the Shocker program. It's with their opponents. And that's why these postponements are happening. But that being said, it's a situation where I just think it's hard to continue to stay. I don't know if motivated is the right word, but it's hard to stay engaged, locked in when you've got, all these stoppages and starting back up. And so I agree with you, especially in a situation where Wichita State is doing everything that they can to try to build a tournament resume with not a whole lot of games to choose from. We've talked about it on previous episodes. They need every game possible. And so hopefully these games are going to be made up. It's really going to hurt the Shockers if, especially a game against a team like Cincinnati, who I know is down a little bit this year, but a game against a name like Cincinnati doesn't end up being made up. So hopefully that happens.
The other thing I'm almost to the point, guys. Aside from winning the American Conference tournament, I'm just not sure I see a path in which Wichita State makes it into the tournament at this point. And I think it's in part dealt by, like we've talked about, just the schedule that they have. But so let's look at the remaining schedule. They've got 2 against Tulane. They've got UCF. They've got two against UCF. Temple. They've, of course, got number 6 Houston. That would go a long ways. But as we talk about,
they should be favored in all those games except for Houston so far.
Right. So then they've also got SMU twice, East Carolina, then one
Which
against
should
Memphis.
be twice. That other game should be put back on the schedule. And the conference said that will be made up as a doubleheader in Wichita if ECU can't find a date to play against Wichita State. That'll be a Friday, Saturday, or a Saturday, Sunday doubleheader in Wichita at Koch Arena because that was a game that was supposed to be played in Wichita that they lost due to ECU's coronavirus protocols.
So essentially you're looking at, really what you're looking at is, Houston and Memphis left on the schedule. That it would be something to put on the resume to really show the folks, what they can bring in that bracket committee, that hey, that they're worthwhile of adding in. I'm just not sure that I'm seeing that even with those 2 wins. Now Houston would go a long ways, but then beating Memphis also depends on how Memphis continues to play throughout the year, because if they stumble 1 or 2, well, then that doesn't provide you a quality win, to really put yourself in that conversation, even with beating Houston. So I'm just afraid that it might be too little too late, in part by the way that their schedule has just dealt this to them, which is just, it is unfortunate, but ultimately Wichita State is a program, and I think most of the fan base, that's what they care about, right? I mean, this is a team that they expect, they want to be in that tournament every single year, and I'm just not sure that it's going to happen this year.
Yeah, so far you've got, just looking at their schedule, at Tulsa was postponed. Does not look like that's been made up. Let's see, the ECU game we already talked about. They had the road game at Memphis. That's been postponed. And South Florida, that was supposed to be a home game. That is not on the schedule. So for Wichita State, I agree with you. I think they have the talent to make it. I think that they can make it, but they're going to have to get some of these games played. I also agree with Tommy. Probably of the 3 teams that we cover on this show primarily, I think that was the least concerning week that was had. On to the University of Kansas Jayhawks. By the way, the Knights of Central Florida. That game is on the U, and you can, of course, listen to it here locally on KUYN. Charles Cook Arena, 3 p.m. tip-off for the Shockers in Central Florida on Saturday. The Jayhawks are on a 3-game losing streak, losing to Oklahoma 75-68. This may be an unpopular opinion with the guy adjusting his headphones right now. I'm not as concerned as maybe you guys are about 3 straight losses. And here is why. You look at where the Big 12 is right now in terms of its overall conference strength. I believe that this is the best conference in the country. Now, if you want to be a Big 10 homer out there and yell at me and say, what about Michigan and Iowa at the top of our league, and Illinois and Wisconsin and Ohio State, that is a valid discussion and a valid point. You may be right. But if you look at the teams in the Big 12 right now that KU has played to and lost to, do we all agree that Baylor's a good team?
Sure.
I think we agree Baylor's a great team. Do we all agree that Texas is a great team? I think Texas is a really good team. KU has a road win at what I think is a really good Texas Tech team. Oklahoma is 20th in KenPom right now. They're 10-4 on the year. Oklahoma is not a bad team at all. West Virginia is a great team. Oklahoma State, probably the worst loss of the year for Kansas. They're 31st and 10-4 in KenPom right now. Okay, so it's not like KU is losing to teams that are 70 plus in these national rankings. That teams in that, I should say, members of the selection committee, they look at these rankings, okay? They're interested in these rankings. They pay attention to Haslametrics and Pomeroy. These aren't just these fringe websites you can get on for free. You have to pay to get on them now because they're so widely accepted as being great basketball resources. Yes, KU is in a slide, but, at this point, I'm not as concerned about the 3-game losing streak. I am concerned about the defense because right now, and Bill Self said it on Hawk Talk earlier this week, he said, we don't have anybody who can guard the ball other than Marcus Garrett right now. And Garrett was tremendous in that KU game down at the LNC with 21 points, 12 rebounds. By the way, in what planet does Marcus Garrett get 12 of 26 KU rebounds? How does that happen? How's that possible? It was not a good game for the KU front court at all. They play tomorrow, KU does, against TCU, but I'm not hitting the red panic button yet. KU has been playing a gauntlet of a schedule.
I'm not hitting the red panic button yet either. But where I am at right now is kind of, I think, where Bill Self is. And it's this team in its current state can't continue. It just can't. They cannot continue to do what they've been doing and expect success. That's just not the way that it works. They need a refresh. They need a reset. They need to find the guys who are going to lead this team down the stretch in the Big 12 regular season and into the tournament. Here's the thing, guys, is, when you're a KU fan, when you follow the Jayhawks, you guys know this just as well as I do. You start thinking about other things as opposed to just wins and losses. Like, you start to think about, okay, where is KU going to be when the tournament comes around? Like, what line are they going to be? Are they going to be a 3 seed? Are they going to be a 4 seed? How, what's it going to look like if they continue to lose? What if they get 3 or 4 more losses in the Big 12? Then where are they going to be when the tournament comes around? You think about that. I also think a little bit about, man, when was the last time that Kansas wasn't ranked in the AP top 25? They're down to number 15 right now.
That's a little premature. That's slightly premature.
It doesn't, I'm not saying that it's going to happen next week, but you drop down to number 15, you start thinking about, all right, there's only 10 spots to go before you're out of the poll altogether. And let's not assume that any team is immune to that. Look at Duke, North Carolina, Kentucky, all out of the AP top 25 poll right now for the first time since the Kennedy administration. So let's not think that Kansas is somehow immune to some of these things that we haven't even thought about for a long time potentially happening. So what it comes down to is Bill Self needing to make adjustments, needing to refresh this team. I don't know, get a shot of adrenaline in the arms of these players, find the lineup that works right, because otherwise we're going to continue to see more of the same from this Jayhawks squad down the stretch.
So I'm kind of all over the place on my thoughts on this team, because panic is not the right word, certainly. But again,
Correct.
like you mentioned, Tommy, the expectations of Kansas basketball are different, right? So winning the Big 12, which is just an expectation every single year, that's not happening this year. Like that, if that's the lens you're looking through, then I think you can go ahead and hit the panic button on that. I don't think that's the right approach, though, because like you mentioned, right, like they're going to make the tournament. Ultimately, while the continued success of winning Big 12s is part of the story of this program, winning a national championship is what's on the mind of these players, on the mind of Bill Self, on a majority of the fan base. So that's kind of the road you're looking at. But so then going from there, kind of analyzing this team and thinking about, what's happening, what's going on, where can they go? I do feel like this is a team, and it's kind of a flip from what we're usually on the other end of this, being that this is a team that at any moment, I absolutely do believe they've got the talent that if they get hot, there's not a team in the country that they couldn't beat. But we're not even close to seeing any type of consistency out of that. But when Jalen Wilson gets hot, when Ochai gets hot, when Christian Brown gets hot, and there's no reason all those guys can't be hot at the same time, there just isn't. That scoring mechanism with Marcus Garrett playing incredible defense and, 2 bigs that are very competent, there's no reason why they couldn't beat any team in the country. Now, we just have not seen even a blip of that out of these guys, right? Like we haven't seen that they can all put it together at the same time. And then on the flip side, they're just bad defensively, right? So they're just not playing. Right. They're just not playing good defense. There's been a lot of breakdown. I've seen a lot of stuff on Twitter of just like completely out of place, just a lack of understanding of where you should be on the floor defensively. But at the same time, we're also, I think there's a combination of lack of awareness of defense, lack of just effort on defense, and then just some bad luck too. So this is a stat that I find interesting. The last 5 games, Texas, TCU, OU, Oklahoma State, Baylor, opponents are shooting 79% from the free throw line and 42% from 3, which is way above league average. So you would certainly expect, for all the analytic nerds out there, there will just be some natural regression on the way opponents are shooting. Again, part of that based on the way Kansas is playing defense, part of that based on really just bad luck of having a team be hot, at the wrong time for us. So I think there's a lot to dissect, but ultimately, like you said, the talent is there. I think maybe the question is now, is the talent going to click and figure it out this year? Or is this something that we're looking at that, hey, the talent's there and they're all coming back next year? Like it might take that next offseason to really get things clicking for this team to really unlock what potential they have with the talent that's on this roster.
I would say that defensively for Kansas right now, they're just average. If you look, I really think there are only two elite defensive teams in the Big 12 right now, Texas Tech and Baylor. And then you've got Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, TCU that are right around there in the mid 60s in terms of points per game allowed. So I think that they're just fine. And on offense, they're 76 points per game, fifth. They're just fine. And obviously that's not what we expect Kansas to be. And let's not pull, I guess give up too early would be the best way to say it. I mean, the 1988 Jayhawks team, they were 12-8 at one point. And at that point, they were talking about, are we going to miss the NCAA tournament? We're going to go to the NIT. They ended up winning the whole thing. And the 2012-2013 team, which according to Bill Self could not beat the Topeka YMCA, they ended up winning 12 of 13 and would have made the Elite Eight if not for the luckiest three-point shot in the history of Michigan basketball. They would have been in the Elite Eight. So, by the way, just a quick note, Ochai Agbaji, Jerry West shooting guard, top 10 award candidate. So TCU, this game is on Thursday. That'll be tomorrow or today as you're listening to this after we drop this. So I'll leave you guys with this before we get to our Wichita Whip Around. Coach Self kind of intimated that he might be tweaking the starting lineup, and that's been something he's been looking at practice this week. He said that they've had good practices. He told Brian Haney on Hawk Talk that they've had really good practices this week. He's been excited about the energy and that they've been doing an evaluation of who they want to have starting and what roles people are going to be playing going forward into Texas Christian. Do you guys see a major turnaround and a major change in the starting lineup?
Yeah, I think you have to. And again, kind of like I said before, the only way that this team is going to be able to refresh themselves a little bit is to get, some fresh legs out on the court. And that can be, for a variety of reasons. It could just be, I've always said a college basketball season is like a long marathon. It isn't a normal season, but especially in a COVID scenario where these teams are isolated, they're in a bubble, for lack of a better term, they only see each other. It can be a mental and emotional grind. Now that again, that you got to win when you're on the court, but at the end of the day, that can all be contributing into maybe a lack of energy or a lack of focus or whatever the case might be. So I think it's going to be important to have a breath of fresh air in the starting lineup, at least for this game against TCU. And let's be honest, if you're going to have kind of a refresh, TCU is as good of a team to do that as any. I mean, they're a bottom tier Big 12 team right now, and you're playing back at home, and so I think that helps you out a little bit. It's the first time that the Jayhawks have played at home since early January, so I think that will help out a little bit. But I wouldn't be surprised to see guys like DeJuan Harris, maybe Tristan Enaruna, crack their way into the starting lineup. I definitely think that we see Ochai Agbaji stay in the starting lineup. Coach Self made it pretty clear that out of everyone, he appreciated Ochai's energy and enthusiasm the most out of everybody from the team. So I think that's a given that you're going to see him continue in the starting lineup. But then from there, I think it's just going to be a matter of, who are those guys that Coach Self said during Hawk Talk that he was really happy with their output. I think those will be the guys that he will give the minutes to. At this point, you got to try something, because as soon as you're done with the TCU game, all of a sudden it's the Big 12 SEC Challenge. The Jayhawks are going on the road to take on Rick Barnes and Tennessee. And then they
funny
do.
Will that be?
Well, exactly. And then it's not like, it gets a lot easier for the Jayhawks. I mean, they do have 2 games against the Wildcats, 2 games against the Cyclones left. So that'll help. But they still have a game against Baylor. They still have a road game against Texas. They have a road game against West Virginia left. So it does continue to be tough for the Jayhawks. So now is a great time, in my opinion, for Bill Self to start to try to figure out who are we going to ride with down the stretch.
I'm not suggesting that this is the answer, but I am curious if you see Bill Self try a 2-post look. I mean, he's ran such an effective, 2-post system for the longest time and really likes that 4-out, 1-in, what he's been doing over the last few years. I really like Mitch Lightfoot, and I'm not even suggesting that him playing more is any type of answer to what's going on, but just, if you're talking about major mix-ups to what they're doing, and if he's frustrated with guards and the way they're defending, I mean, I think a potential answer would be, why not go with the traditional lineup, put Mitch Lightfoot in the 4. You've seen that he moves so much better than McCormick does, so should be able to guard other teams, 4, which is traditionally a big man. I know the game of basketball is kind of shifting just in a different direction in general. My only qualm or hesitation about thinking that this might be a possibility of what Bill does, and I guess I'm also saying it through the lens of, at times, I'm not suggesting they're going to try to run this as an offense moving forward or anything like that. But they don't. I mean, there's just no depth after McCormick and Mitch Lightfoot, unless they're seeing things from Jethro Muscadin, or I might be not pronouncing that right in practice. But I don't think that that's the case. So I think if you do see a 2-post lineup, 2 big man lineup, it would just be for blips throughout the game, right? I mean, maybe you'd get a 5-6 minute stretch, and that even might be too much of maybe David and Mitch. But I think those almost, something like that could almost be used effectively, just in a sense of just like you throw in the zone defense, right? I mean, just at times, just to make the other team adjust to what you're doing. That's just thoughts in my head. Again, I'm not suggesting that's the answer. I'm just wondering, here's maybe something that they could look at that is a major shift to what they're doing. But ultimately, I think this team's going to be fine. There's still a ton of talent. And frankly, it's a weird thing to say because it's not what you're used to at the University of Kansas. But there's a ton of talent, and a ton of talent's going to be coming back next year. Quite possibly everybody will be coming back next year. And this team would be loaded going into next season.
Jayhawks hosting the Horned Frogs, 7 p.m. And for those of you who are high rollers in the listening audience, so 2%, 4%, you can see the game on ESPN Plus. The game is on the mothership, 5 p.m. on Saturday at Tennessee in the SEC Big 12 Challenge, and the Dillon's Sunflower Showdown coming up on February 2nd next week. So not getting any easier for Kansas State. We wrap up the show today with our Wichita Whip Around, what you need to know as a Wichita fan that maybe you haven't covered. I asked the guys to each come with at least one story to share with you today as we wrap up this show of the Keeper of the Games. I'm going to start with Wichita State volleyball. The Shockers playing a spring schedule. They did not get to play a fall schedule, obviously. They ran some scrimmages. They have started 3-0 on the year with wins against South Dakota, Oral Roberts, and at Missouri State. Nicole Anderson leading the Shockers with 37 kills, 43.5 points, hitting .284 for the Shocks. And I think it's really exciting because Sina Uluwave, who was pretty involved in the offense last year, is one of the team leaders in digs, and Wichita State is able to win without her having a lot of swings right now. They haven't been setting her as much as she is accustomed to. She ended up with 150 kills, I think, last year as a freshman. They are having a black and yellow scrimmage right now that is going on. It started at 7 o'clock at Charles Koch Arena. They are allowing 2,000 fans in, and they will have a home opener coming up I think on the 3rd and the 4th and the 5th of February, 7 p.m. on the 4th, 1 p.m. on the 5th for the home opener. So if you're not able to get into a Shocker basketball game, but you want that college atmosphere, if you are a Shocker fan, you really ought to go and check out Wichita State Shocker volleyball as they host North Texas and look to stay undefeated on the year.
Yeah, so my Wichita Whip Around topic for the day, I want to give a huge shout out to the Wichita Wings soccer team. It's a squad that we have not talked about one time on this program.
I bring very little soccer expertise to the program. I will admit that right now.
Well, so do I. But the Wings are they're playing great to kick off their season inside Hartman Arena. They've been able to do that in front of a limited number of fans. They are 3-0 to start the season, and they are the Heartland Invitational champions. They beat a handful of different teams. They beat the Omaha Kings. They also beat the Colorado Inferno to win that tournament. And so also FC Amarillo, they were in that tournament as well. And so congratulations to the Wichita Wings. Of course, they are back in action. I believe this is their second season as an affiliated team in service playing again at Hartman Arena. So they beat the Colorado Inferno, their first matchup of the season, won that game 9-2. A lot of talent on that squad, and so the fact that they start the season 3-0, you got to be pretty happy if you're a soccer fan in Wichita.
All right, boys. So you all know how much I overachieve on this podcast. So I came with 2 stories.
Good. I have plenty of stories. So yeah, go ahead with your first one.
Okay, so first, we've talked a lot about, the ability of fans to attend sports games, here in the Wichita Metro for the prep. So Wichita USD 259 has made a change to their athletic ticket policy. The school district they made a change beginning January 29th. Students participating in the sport can offer 2 tickets to parents, guardians, siblings, or friends of the family, which previously those tickets were limited to just parents or guardians only. This change doesn't apply to swimming or bowling just due to the venues that they're hosting those events at. But I think this is awesome. I think a small thing that gets overlooked how often, I think there's a lot of kids out there, maybe a lot is not the right way to say it, but I think there's kids out there that, the person who's closest to them, the person who shows them attention that comes to these games isn't always, a parent or a guardian. Sometimes it is an aunt, an uncle, a grandma, a grandpa, someone who maybe is not the actual guardian of these children. So to have that opportunity for them to be able to come and support the kids, and the kids to have whoever that most meaningful, person is, or maybe mom and dad just can't make the game and they still want someone there to support them. And now aunt and uncle can come, or the neighbor that's close can come. I think that's just so cool. So I'm glad that they've made this change, and that will go into effect on January 29th. Now, my second story.
Go
ahead.
Go for it. Well, I was going to say, we got a couple of other basketball games that are going on today. The Shocker women ended a 6-game losing streak. They beat Cincinnati today. 5 games during the stretch, by the way. We talked about the Shocker men and how their schedule has been ravaged by coronavirus. In this stretch, the Shockers have had 5 games either postponed or canceled. SMU canceled their season, by the way, a few weeks ago. And the Shockers beat Cincinnati, first ever win against Cincinnati, 60-52, outscoring the Bearcats 18-9 in the third. Asia Strong leading the Shockers 15 points per game. She went for 17 in this game. And the Kansas women, this goes back to last week. Kansas State blew a 14-point first-half lead. KU stormed back to win the Sunflower Showdown 70-63. Kansas is 6-5, 2-3 in the Big 12. They have not finished outside of the bottom 2 in the Big 12 standings since 2013, when they went 20-14, 8-10, and all but one loss this year is by 10 points or less. They are currently trailing 59-52 in the third period at Oklahoma, a game in which KU has trailed by as many as 14. And by the way, what happened to Oklahoma? Sherry Cole. The Sooners are 4-7, 1-5. By the way, Jackie Stiles is an assistant on our coaching staff. They were competing for national championship games, it seemed like yesterday, and now they're just not good. They are beating Kansas, but right now, not very good down there in Oklahoma. Hopefully KU can pull this one out on the road.
Okay, so perfect. This is perfect time to segue into my second story here. We had talked about, Tommy, that we have not hardly covered girls prep basketball. That's something that we wanted to do, right? So my second story is a shout out, and hopefully I'm going to get this name right, but Karenna Gerber from the Halstead Dragons dropped 40 wow. So it'd be Tuesday night, or last night as we're recording this podcast, Tuesday night over Rose Hill. Karenna Gerber, wow. I think my understanding, I read the story, I think she's a junior at Halstead there, and I think they're the number 2 team, in their division. But so they got me thinking, and I want to parlay this into a little bit of trivia for you guys. 40 points, that's a lot in girls high school basketball. Those scores just don't get up as high as the men, or then obviously even men's prep basketball doesn't get as high as you move into college and NBA, of course. Do you guys know who has scored the most points in a single game in Kansas women's prep basketball history? 1,
I would
2,
guess Jackie Stiles.
I was going to say Jackie Stiles.
Perfect segue, because you just dropped her name. And then 2, I want you both to take a guess at what that single game record is.
God, do I know this? I'm going to go with 79.
I don't even have a guess. I think Blake's going to be better than I will be anyway.
71. That's incredible. 71.
71 is a lot of points.
My God. So that's my fun Kansas girls prep basketball update and shout out. And I apologize. I don't know if Karenna Gerber, if this podcast will make it to her ears, but I hope I pronounced your name right. So big shout out on 40 over Rose Hill. That's a great game.
They get Spotify in Halstead, do they not?
I'm sure they do.
I mean,
I'm sure they do.
So they got the podcast for sure.
Hey, Blake, I got one more story. Since Weston came with two, I've got a second one, and that is the Wichita State baseball team released their schedule on Wednesday.
Today. Big news.
Drop their schedule, 29 home games at X Stadium for this season for Eric Wedge's team. And I am super excited to see what Shocker baseball looks like this year. If you'll remember back to last season, they started their season 13-2 under first-year head coach Eric Wedge before COVID-19 canceled the season. And one of my favorite things of all time, and I know it's going to be different this year due to COVID, but I love February baseball at X Stadium. It's always freezing cold. You're bundled up. There's just something about it. I don't know why I like it so much. College baseball in February always makes me really, really happy. But of course, they're playing 32 American Conference contests. There'll be 4-game series over a 3-day span. So one day will be doubleheaders. They've got a home game against in-state rival K-State and road series at Arizona, who is a Pac-12 baseball power, and perennial NCAA qualifier Stetson. So it's quite a schedule this season for Eric Wedge and the Shocker baseball squad.
Not only that, but they've got an 8-game series scheduled against Houston. That has to be a record. I've never heard of an 8-game series ever in college baseball. And the really exciting thing about this Shocker baseball team, remember, they finished 10-0. That's no losses at X Stadium last year for Eric Wedge. They were ranked, I think, 30th in the country when the season ended. They've got their 2 best hitters back. Cooper Kornblum led the team, hitting .354. Hunter Gibson hit .316 last year. It's a junior and freshman, so they'll be a sophomore and senior respectively, I believe. The classifications, I'm not sure what the classifications are, because I think that actually turned out to be a give-back year for baseball, and I don't think that this spring season will be a give-back year. The eligibility is so screwed up, I can't keep track of it, but those are 2 guys, one of them, Kornblum, a real young guy, who I think has got a chance to maybe be one of the top freshmen in the American Conference. He had an OPS of 1,117 last year, so pretty amazing. So we'll wrap up the whip around with Wichita Thunder hockey. Have you been keeping track of these guys on the ice? They beat Indy 2-1 Sunday. They're 7-2-1 on the season. Indy, by the way, was leading the Eastern Division. Wichita is second in the West, 4th in the league. Mateo Gennaro, 13 points in 10 games with 6 goals and 7 assists. And Evan Wenninger is the number 3 goaltender. And Bobby McCann, 13 points in 10 games. He's leading all rookies. So there is a lot to be excited about if you're a Wichita Thunder fan. They have had a couple of seasons that have been rather disappointing back when they were, if you have been following them, they made back-to-back CHL Finals series. I don't even remember what it's called. Mousy was going to kill me in my sleep for not knowing that. But they were a Central Hockey power, kind of had fallen off, but obviously playing extremely well on the ice here to start the 2021 season finally.
Yeah, and hats off to head coach Bruce Ramsey and the Thunder squad. Not only did they beat Indy 2-1, Blake, but their previous 4 games were postponed due to COVID-19. We talked about it.
Yes, that's right.
Last week on the program about how Sedgwick County designated the Thunder as a COVID-19 active cluster. And so they had 4 games postponed, called off. They were 6-2-1 when that happened. They come right back out after 2 weeks off. Their last game was January 10th at home against Kansas City, which was a win. They come back out after that 2-week hiatus, and they beat Indy 2-1 to move to 7-2-1. Of course, their schedule continues. They're playing back at home this weekend against Rapid City for a 3-game set inside Intrust Bank Arena. So, again, hats off to the entire Thunder squad for overcoming that COVID cluster, that hiatus, that time off, and coming out with the victory. That's pretty awesome.
That's going to be our show here. Before we wrap up, guys, any corrections or retractions that you'd like to make before we say goodbye?
I do, and actually, Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to ask a question. Did you tell me that there was a Wichita State baseball player named Cooper Kornblum?
Cooper Kornblum, yes.
That's a baseball name right there. Cooper Kornblum. That is fantastic.
Yeah, he's from Woodway, Texas, a freshman, and he had 12 RBIs in 15 games last year, 17 hits. He slugged .625, and I got a chance to call one of his games on television, and I watched a lot doing the public address. I mean, this guy is a player. This guy is going to be really good infielder.
Does he play first base?
No, not a first. 5'11", 174 kind of guy, middle infielder.
Okay, I was picturing. I mean, Cooper Kornblum. I was
not
thinking like 6'4",
no.
250. Okay,
no.
I love the name though. That's a baseball name.
Hit for power though. He had 3 triples in 15 games last year as a freshman. I mean, can you wrap your head around that? There are guys who will go an entire career in college and only have 3 triples. He had 3 triples. Now, Garrett Costas, he had 4 triples last year. The Shockers were a triple manufacturing machine. They had 9 triples as a team in 15 games, which is preposterous. But yeah, this is going to be a really exciting time. I know you guys have seen the facilities that they've put in, the new strength training facilities. I feel like Shocker baseball is poised to make a big comeback.
Love it.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I actually, the nice thing about not hosting the show, Blake, is that I can actually go through and I can find some of the things that I need to correct about the show. Cause I can't do that when I'm actually hosting it. So this isn't a correction, but it is a clarification. You were correct. The last team to repeat as back-to-back Super Bowl champions, the New England Patriots. You said the early 2000s. You were correct. 2003, 2004. That was the last time a team won 2 Super Bowls back-to-back. And then actually a correction to make for myself. I said that Shaquille Barrett for the Buccaneers had an interception in the game against the Packers. He did not, but he did have several sacks in that game. In fact, I think he had 2 or 3 sacks in that game. So I mistook an interception for a sack, but that's my only correction. I don't know. You guys have any?
I also have a correction. I think I conflated Dexter Dennis and Tyson Etienne's field goals for the last game. Dexter Dennis 3 for 23 from the field, 2 for 15 on his own over the last 3 games, not combined with Tyson Etienne. And we've talked about Dexter Dennis. Not the only thing that he does is shoot for Wichita State. He has not shot the ball well this year, but he plays tremendous defense because Coach Brown has talked about that ad nauseum about how important he is. And I've seen how important he is defensively. So not trying to make him into a one-dimensional player, but looking at his stats, 3 for 23, but that's over the last 3 games just on his own. So that is our show. Once again, if you want to follow us, we are at KOGpod on Twitter, KOGsports.com. If you dare, watch on YouTube. Make sure you hit the like and subscribe button on whatever podcast platform or on YouTube, on Facebook. It helps us out a ton. And I am at BECRIPPS, BE Cripps on Twitter. Tommy and Weston, give the people your Twitter handles if they want to follow you.
Yeah, you can follow me anytime at Tweets from Tommy.
I'm over here at WMills94.
Obviously, next week is going to be very Chiefs heavy. Super Bowl 55, our official preview comes at you next week as we get set for Kansas City and Tampa Bay at the Super Bowl. That's our show. We'll see you next week. This is Keeper of the Games in Wichita.
Take care, guys.
You've been listening to Keeper of the Games with Tommy Castor, Weston Mills, and Blake Cripps. Don't forget to subscribe, download, and listen on all major podcast platforms like Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and more. Visit our website at KOGsports.com. Find the podcast and videos on Facebook and YouTube at Keeper of the Games. And follow the podcast on Twitter and Instagram at KOGpod. That's KOGpod.